Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The crowd hated her before the first stone hit. Aerith Lunevale felt it in the air, thick as smoke, heavy as a held breath. She stood barefoot in the ash-bound court, wrists bound with iron thread, dust clinging to the hem of her torn gray dress. Above her, banners snapped in the wind, wolf sigils glaring down like watching eyes. When the first stone struck her shoulder, pain bloomed sharp and hot, but the laughter hurt worse. Someone shouted, "Witch!" Another spat near her feet. Aerith did not scream. She lifted her chin even as blood slid warm along her skin. Then the roar came, not from the crowd, from the throne. Ryden Kael'mor surged to his feet, eyes glowing. Silver, hands clenched so tight the carved armrest cracked. His wolf howled inside him, furious, possessive, alive. Sovael did not see a prisoner. He saw his chosen. The bond slammed into Ryden's chest like lightning, stealing his breath. "Mine," the wolf demanded. The court froze. Aerith looked up, meeting the Alpha King's gaze. In that instant, she knew two terrible truths. His wolf had chosen her, and his kingdom would never forgive it. They dragged her away before the silence could break. Iron doors groaned shut behind her, sealing her inside a narrow stone cell that smelled of cold water and old fear. Aerith's knees buckled, and she slid down the wall, pressing shaking fingers to her bruised shoulder. She had known hatred before. Born in the Grafen lowlands, she learned early how to survive sideways glances and whispered curses. Her mother had warned her, voice thin and urgent, that Aerith must never draw attention, that some bloodlines were remembered too well, but hunger had driven her to the capital. Hope had betrayed her. She remembered the guards seizing her in the market, the sudden shout when the crystal flared in her presence. Magic, they said. A lie, she thought, or a mistake. Now chains bit into her wrists, and the echo of the crowd still rang in her ears. Above, the court argued. She could hear it faintly. Names she did not know. Rage, fear, the scrape of power shifting. Aerith closed her eyes and breathed through the pain, counting heartbeats. She did not know the Alpha King. She did not want his attention. Yet when she thought of his silver gaze, something warm stirred beneath her ribs, terrifying and alive, like a door cracking open in her chest. Ryden Kael'mor stood alone in the throne chamber long after the court dispersed. Splintered wood lay at his feet. His hands trembled. He had ruled since he was 17, forged by duty and restraint, praised for control. None of that mattered now. Sovael paced inside him, a storm of instinct and certainty. "You felt it," the wolf insisted. Ryden pressed a hand to his sternum, where the bond burned, undeniable. He had been taught mates were chosen among their own. Noble blood, strong lineage, not a starving girl dragged in chains. The memory of Aerith's lifted chin haunted him. No pleading, no fear in her eyes, only pain and something like defiance. The council would revolt. Queen Halviera's silence had been sharp with warning. Lord Brennick's face had twisted with disgust. Oracle Thysan had gone pale, whispering words Ryden had not heard. He knew what they would say, that the bond was wrong, corrupted, dangerous. He also knew the truth thrumming through his bones. His wolf had chosen. There was no undoing it. Ryden turned toward the balcony, the wind carrying distant howls from the outer packs. For the first time in his life, the path ahead did not feel carved. It felt like fire. The cell door opened at dusk. Aerith flinched as torchlight spilled across the floor. She expected guards, chains, another accusation. Instead, a woman stepped inside, her cloak plain, her eyes kind but guarded. "My name is Luneth Gray," she said softly, kneeling to meet Aerith's gaze. "I was sent to tend your wounds." Aerith hesitated, then nodded. Luneth's hands were gentle, cleaning blood, binding bruises. They are afraid of you, Luneth murmured. And of what you mean. Aerith swallowed. I don't mean anything, she said. Luneth paused. That is rarely true. As the door closed again, night deepened. Aerith lay awake, listening to the castle breathe. Footsteps passed. Wolves howled beyond stone. Then she felt it. A pull. Subtle but sure, like a thread drawn tight around her heart. Her breath caught. She sat up slowly, palms pressed to her chest. Somewhere above, someone else felt it too. The connection hummed, warming her blood, easing her pain. Aerith had never believed in fate. Yet as the bond settled, quiet and unbreakable, fear curled in her stomach. Whatever she was, whatever they thought she was, this bond would drag it into the light. By dawn, the kingdom was already sharpening its knives. Rumors raced through Kael'mor Citadel faster than guards could silence them. A low-born girl, a false mate, a threat to the throne. In the cell, Aerith stood as straight as she could, ignoring the ache in her body. She sensed him then, unmistakable, standing on the other side of the door. Raiden did not enter. He rested his forehead briefly against the stone, unseen. I will not let them kill you, he said quietly. Aerith's fingers curled. I didn't ask you to, she replied, voice steady. Silence stretched, heavy with things unsaid. They will test you, he warned. They will try to break the bond. Aerith closed her eyes. Images flickered behind them, strange and distant. Moonlight, blood, a howl that sounded like her own. Then they should be careful, she said. Raiden almost smiled. Footsteps approached, harsh and purposeful. Torches flared. Orders barked. Raiden straightened, the Alpha King once more. The door creaked open, and armored figures filled the doorway. As chains reached for her wrists again, Aerith lifted her chin. Above them all, the moon rose pale and watchful. The bond tightened, unyielding. Whatever came next would not be gentle. The test began with fire. Aerith felt the heat before she saw it, a wall of orange light flaring to life in the circular chamber beneath Kael'mor Citadel. Stone steps descended into the pit, each one etched with old runes that hummed softly, like insects trapped in rock. Chains were removed, not out of mercy, but ceremony. The crowd gathered above, nobles and guards forming a ring of shadows. Aerith stood alone at the center, her borrowed white tunic stark against the soot-stained floor. The smell of burning oil stung her nose. Oracle Thaysain raised her staff, eyes clouded, voice echoing as she spoke words Aerith did not understand. The flames surged higher. Fear rippled through Aerith, sharp and cold, but beneath it pulsed the bond, steady and warm. Somewhere close, Raiden watched. She could feel his attention like a hand at her back. If she burns, the bond is false, someone shouted. Aerith clenched her fists. She had been burned before by hunger, by loss, by silence. Fire did not scare her as much as their hope that it would. When the flames rushed inward, she did not run. She stood, heart pounding, eyes open, waiting for pain or truth. Raiden fought the urge to step forward. Every instinct screamed to tear the pit apart, to pull her from danger. Sovael raged, snarling at the restraints of duty. They will kill her, the wolf warned. Raiden's jaw tightened. He knew the rules. The trials were ancient, designed to expose deception. Yet this felt different, personal, punitive. The fire licked Aerith's skin, curling around her like living things. The crowd leaned in. Then the flames bent away. A gasp rippled through the chamber. Aerith staggered, heat washing over her without harm. Her hair fluttered, untouched. The runes flared bright silver. Oracle Thaysain's staff cracked against the stone as she stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. She carries the mark, the oracle whispered. Murmurs erupted, fear and fury colliding. Raiden's chest loosened with a breath he hadn't known he held. Pride flickered, dangerous and fierce. But he also saw the shift in the crowd, the way fear sharpened into resolve. Passing the test would not save her. It would only make her more dangerous to them. They did not give her time to recover. Aerith was escorted to a smaller chamber, walls slick with moisture, lit by a single hanging lantern. Luneth Gray waited inside, her mouth set in a thin line. "You should have burned," Luneth said quietly, not unkindly. Aerith lowered herself onto the stone bench, legs shaking. "I know." Luneth wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "They will not stop," she warned. "Some believe the kingdom will fall if you remain." Aerith stared at her hands. In the fire she had felt something awaken, a pulse answering the bond, old and deep. It frightened her more than the flames. "What am I?" she asked. Luneth hesitated. "That is what they fear," she said. Before Aerith could press further, the door opened. Lord Brenwick entered, flanked by guards. His smile was thin, sharp. "The next test will be simpler," he said. "Truth." He placed a small vial on the table, dark liquid glinting. "Drink. If you lie, the poison will show." Aerith looked from the vial to his eyes. She saw hunger there, not for justice, but control. "What do you want to know?" she asked. Brenwick leaned close. "Who sent you?" The vial burned as it slid down her throat, bitter and cold. Aerith swallowed, forcing herself to breathe evenly. "No one," she said. The liquid twisted in her veins, cold fingers, scraping her insides. Pain spiked, then faded. Brenwick's eyes narrowed. "Again," he said. "Why were you in the capital?" Aerith's jaw tightened. "To find work." The poison surged, then settled. Whispers filled the room. Brenwick's patience thinned. "You expect us to believe this is chance?" he snapped. Aerith met his gaze, something fierce rising despite her fear. "I don't care what you believe." A ripple of shock passed through the guards. Brenwick straightened, lips curling. "Then you will care about the final test," he said. He turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Aerith sagged, lungs burning. Luneth caught her shoulders. "They are pushing you toward something," Luneth murmured. "Toward him." Aerith closed her eyes, the bond pulsing in response to her thoughts of Raiden. She did not know him, yet his presence felt like safety and ruin intertwined. "I never asked for this," she whispered. Luneth squeezed her hand. Neither did he. Night fell heavy over the citadel. Raiden paced the length of his chamber, boots striking stone in sharp rhythms. Reports piled at his desk, untouched. He felt every tremor of Aerith's pain through the bond, muted but real. Sovael pressed close, a silent weight of anger and resolve. "They will try to force a severing," the wolf warned. Raiden's hands curled. Severing a true bond could kill them both, or leave them hollow. A knock sounded. Queen Halviera entered, her expression unreadable. "You are losing them," she said without preamble. "They see weakness." Raiden met her gaze. "They see fear," he corrected, "and they feed it." Halviera sighed. "End this," she urged. "Choose the kingdom." Raiden felt the bond flare at the thought of abandoning Aerith. Pain lanced through him, sharp and final. "I am," he said quietly. Halviera studied him, then nodded once. "Then be prepared to bleed for it." When she left, Raiden turned toward the window. The moon hung low, bright and unforgiving. Somewhere below, Aerith lay awake, feeling the same pull, the same looming edge. At dawn, they would bring her to the Hall of Quiet Blood, and nothing that followed would be survivable without choosing a side. The Hall of Quiet Blood lived up to its name. Aerith felt the silence first, thick and pressing, swallowing the sound of her footsteps as guards led her inside. The chamber was circular, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor marked with concentric rings darkened by centuries of sacrifice. The air smelled of iron and old stone. She stood at the center again, always the center, while nobles gathered at a distance, their faces pale with anticipation. At the far end, Raiden waited, rigid and still, his expression carved from restraint. Aerith did not look away. The bond between them pulsed harder here, drawn to the blood-soaked ground, alive and restless. Oracle Thyzan stepped forward, her voice hushed but clear. "This hall reveals what lies beneath," she said. "Blood remembers." A blade was placed on the altar, its edge catching the lantern light. Aerith's throat tightened. She had bled before for nothing. Now they wanted meaning. "If she is unworthy," Lord Brenwick said, "the hall will reject her." Aerith exhaled slowly. Whatever she was, she would not beg to exist. The blade was cold in her palm. Aerith pressed it to her skin, hesitating only a heartbeat before drawing it across her hand. Pain flared, sharp and clean. Blood spilled, dark against pale stone, soaking into the grooves. The hall responded instantly. The runes carved into the floor ignited, silver light racing outward in spirals. Aerith gasped as something pulled at her from inside, not draining but calling. Images slammed into her mind without warning. A woman running through snow, clutching a child. Wolves howling in grief, a crown shattered against stone. Aerith cried out, dropping to her knees as the visions burned brighter. Around her, the nobles recoiled. Oracle Thyzan staggered, clutching her chest. "Impossible," she whispered. The light surged, lifting Aerith's hair, wrapping her in a storm of memory and power. Through it all, the bond anchored her, Raiden's presence a solid weight she could cling to. When the light finally dimmed, the hall fell silent again. Aerith knelt, trembling, blood dripping from her hand. The hall had not rejected her. It had answered. Raiden moved before anyone could stop him. He crossed the chamber in long strides, ignoring shouts, dropping to his knees in front of her. The crowd erupted, voices colliding in panic and rage. "Get back," Brenwick ordered. Raiden did not listen. He took Aerith's bleeding hand in his, the contact sending a shock through them both. Sovale surged, fierce and triumphant. "She is marked," the wolf growled. Raiden felt it now, clearly. Not corruption, legacy. The visions echoed in his own mind, fragments, aligning with half-forgotten histories. "She is not a threat," he said aloud, voice carrying despite the chaos. "She is the answer you buried." Brenwick laughed, sharp and brittle. "Or the end of us all." Guards advanced, spears lowering. Aerith looked up at Raiden, fear and resolve tangling in her chest. "If staying means war," she said quietly, "I will leave." The bond screamed at the thought, pain lancing through Raiden's ribs. He shook his head once. "No," he said, "if leaving means your death." He stood, placing himself between Aerith and the guards. The line had been drawn. They were separated by force. Aerith was dragged back to her cell as the hall erupted into shouting, accusations flying like blades. Her hand throbbed, wrapped now in rough cloth, but the deeper ache was inside. The visions clung to her, fragments replaying when she closed her eyes. A child with silver eyes, a wolf kneeling before a woman crowned in moonlight. Aerith pressed her forehead to the cold stone wall, breathing through the confusion. She had never wanted power, only safety, yet something ancient had recognized her, claimed her as its own. Footsteps approached softly. Luneth slipped inside, eyes wide with awe and fear. "They're terrified," she whispered. "The council is split." Aerith laughed weakly. "So am I." Luneth hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "The Oracle believes your bloodline was erased centuries ago. Hidden." Aerith stiffened. Her mother's warnings echoed, sudden and sharp. "Hidden from what?" she asked. Luneth swallowed. "From kings." The door creaked again. This time it was Raiden. Bruised, furious, alive. He did not touch her, but the bond hummed between them, strong and sure. "They plan to sever us at dawn," he said. Aerith's breath caught. Severing meant agony, maybe death. "Then we don't wait for dawn," she replied. The escape was reckless and quiet all at once. Luneth led them through servant corridors, torchlight flickering against damp walls. Alarms had not yet been raised, but time pressed in on them from every side. Aerith moved on instinct, feet sure despite unfamiliar paths. The bond guided her, tugging her toward Raiden whenever they separated. At the outer gate, the night air hit her like freedom and fear combined. Wolves howled in the distance, unsettled. "You don't have to come," Aerith said, turning to Raiden. He met her gaze, silver eyes steady. "I already have." The gates groaned open just as shouts rang out behind them. Arrows flew, clattering against stone. Raiden shifted mid-stride, bones snapping, fur erupting in a flash of pain and power. Sovael burst free, massive and gleaming, placing himself between Aerith and the threat. Aerith ran, heart hammering, the moon blazing overhead. As they crossed into the dark beyond the citadel walls, Aerith felt it clearly for the first time. Whatever she was becoming, whatever past had claimed her, there would be no turning back. The kingdom would hunt them, and she would no longer run blindly. Dawn broke pale and cold over the Bramblefen plains, mist clinging low to the earth like a living thing. Aerith's lungs burned as she ran, boots borrowed and ill-fitting, breath tearing from her chest in ragged pulls. Behind her, Sovael moved like a shadow made of muscle and moonlight, massive paws barely touching the ground. Raiden ran beside her in human form again, blood streaking his temple where an arrow had grazed him. Neither spoke. Words felt too fragile for the weight pressing down on them. When they finally stopped beneath a stand of twisted birch, Aerith bent double, hands braced on her knees, fighting the urge to retch. The bond thrummed steadily, grounding her, keeping panic from swallowing her whole. She lifted her head and saw it then. Riders cresting a distant hill, banners snapping. The hunt had begun. Aerith's stomach twisted. "They won't stop," she said hoarsely. Raiden nodded. "No," he replied. "They won't." He scanned the horizon, calculating. The Alpha King was gone now. What stood beside her was a man stripped of crown and certainty, driven by instinct and choice. "We head for Silver Reach Ravine," he said. "Few will follow us there." Aerith swallowed, staring at the endless land ahead. Survival had always meant staying small. Now it meant running straight into legend. The plains gave way to broken stone and wind as the sun climbed higher. Silver Reach Ravine cut the land open like a scar, sheer walls dropping into mist and echoing silence. Aerith's legs trembled as they approached the narrow crossing, a natural bridge worn thin by time. Below, nothing but white fog and the promise of death. "I can't," Aerith whispered, heart pounding. Raiden stopped, turning to face her fully. His expression softened, the hard edges easing. "You can," he said, "and you won't do it alone." He took her hands, rough and warm, grounding her as the bond flared brighter. For a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. Aerith nodded, swallowing fear, and took her first step. Halfway across, the sound of horns shattered the quiet. Wolves howled in answer. Aerith's foot slipped on loose stone, panic exploding through her. She cried out as Raiden lunged, gripping her wrist, muscles straining. For a heartbeat she dangled over nothing, breath caught in her throat. Then Sovael leapt, teeth sinking into Raiden's cloak, hauling them both back to safety. Aerith collapsed, shaking, laughter and tears breaking free at once. They had crossed, but the sound of pursuit grew louder. The ravine had bought them time, nothing more. They hid among the rocks as riders reached the ravine's edge, curses echoing as they realized the crossing was lost. Aerith pressed herself into the stone, heart hammering so loudly she was sure it would betray her. Raiden watched the riders with a predator's stillness, eyes cold and calculating. When the last banner vanished, he sagged slightly, exhaustion bleeding through his control. They made camp in a shallow cave carved by water and wind. Luneth's lessons echoed in Aerith's mind as she tended Raiden's wound, hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You shouldn't have chosen me," she said quietly, tying off the bandage. Raiden looked at her then, really looked, and something fierce and gentle flickered in his gaze. "I didn't," he replied. "My wolf did," Aerith snorted weakly. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" He smiled, small and honest. "It makes it true." Silence settled, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the wind howled through stone, sounding eerily like mourning. Aerith stared into the dim, visions stirring again behind her eyes. "They think I'll destroy the kingdom," she murmured. Raiden's jaw tightened. "They fear what they can't control." Aerith hugged her knees, the truth settling, painfully deep. Fear had always found her. Now it wore a crown. Night fell hard and starless. Aerith woke with a gasp, heart racing, the taste of blood sharp on her tongue. The vision had been vivid. Too vivid. She saw fire consuming Kael'mor's citadel, heard screams, felt the weight of a crown heavy on her head. She sat up shaking as Raiden stirred. "It's happening," she whispered. "The future. It's trying to show me." Raiden frowned, concern etching his features. "What did you see?" Aerith hesitated, then told him everything. The fire, the fall, her own reflection, eyes glowing silver. When she finished, silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind. "Prophecy isn't fate," Raiden said finally, though doubt flickered. "It's a warning." Aerith hugged herself. "Or a choice." She looked at him, fear and resolve tangling tight. "If staying with you means bloodshed, I won't do it." The bond flared painfully at the thought of leaving. Raiden reached out, stopping just short of touching her. "And if leaving means you die?" he asked softly. Aerith had no answer. Outside, unseen eyes watched the cave, breath misting in the cold. The hunt had not lost them. It had merely circled wider. By morning, the truth could no longer be ignored. Aerith felt it before she saw it, the wrongness prickling along her skin. "We're not alone," she whispered. Raiden nodded, already rising, tension coiling through him. A figure stepped into the cave's mouth, hood drawn low, hands empty, but posture confident. "Peace," the stranger said. "If you still know what that is." Raiden's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The hood fell back, revealing sharp features and eyes too knowing to be kind. "My name is Vaelor Cane," he said calmly, "and your kingdom has offered a great price for the girl." Aerith's stomach dropped. Vaelor's gaze slid to her, calculating. "A live kiss," he added. "For now." Sovale growled deep in Raiden's chest, a promise of violence. Aerith felt the bond tighten, fear and fury colliding. She stepped forward before Raiden could stop her. "You'll never take me," she said, voice steady despite the terror clawing inside. Vaelor smiled, thin and cold. "We'll see." Outside, more shapes moved, blocking the light. The trap had closed, and this time running would not be enough. Vaelor Cane did not rush them. He stood framed by dawn light, calm as a merchant weighing coin, while his hunters spread silently across the rocks. Aerith felt the pressure first, a tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with being seen. Not as a girl, as a prize. Raiden stepped slightly in front of her, his body a barrier, his breath steady despite the snarl building in his throat. "You're trespassing," Raiden said. Vaelor's smile widened. "You abdicated when you ran." The words struck clean and sharp. Aerith flinched, then stilled. She would not hide behind him. She moved to his side, shoulder brushing his arm. The bond surged, approval humming like a low song. Vaelor's gaze flicked between them, interest sharpening. "Fascinating," he murmured. "It's already taken root." He gestured, and the hunters tightened their circle. Aerith scanned the exits, mind racing. Stone, fog, wind. Then something stirred beneath her fear, answering the danger. The same pull she had felt in the fire, in the blood hall. Power whispered, patient and waiting. Aerith inhaled, steadying herself, and chose not to run. Raiden felt it the instant she made the choice. The bond flared hot, flooding him with her resolve, her fear sharpening into clarity. "Stay behind me," he growled. Aerith shook her head once. "No." Vaelor laughed softly. "Good," he said. "I hate chasing." He lifted a hand. The hunters lunged. Raiden shifted mid-motion, bones cracking as Sovael surged free. A blur of silver and fury, the cave exploded into chaos. Aerith ducked as a blade whistled past, heart hammering. She grabbed a fallen torch, flame licking her fingers without pain. Surprise flashed through her. She swung, fire arcing wide, forcing space. A hunter stumbled back, swearing. Aerith felt it then, unmistakable. The fire bent to her will, not wild, obedient. She gasped, shock slicing through her focus. Focus! Raiden shouted through clenched teeth as Sovael slammed into another attacker. Aerith swallowed, grounding herself in the bond, letting it anchor her as instinct took over. She moved with purpose, not grace, each step chosen. When Valor raised his crossbow, time seemed to slow. Aerith lifted the torch, flames surging bright as moonlight, and the bolt melted midair. Silence crashed down, heavy and stunned. Valor's expression shifted, curiosity sharpening into something colder. So it's true, he said softly. The blood remembers. Aerith's arm trembled, exhaustion biting deep, but she held the flame steady. Raiden shifted back, breathing hard, blood streaking his fur and skin. Hunters lay groaning or still around them. Valor clapped once, slow and deliberate. Enough, he called. The remaining hunters froze, weapons lowering. You've proven my point, he said, eyes never leaving Aerith. You're dangerous. Aerith's jaw tightened. Leave us alone. Valor shook his head. I can't. He stepped closer, boots crunching on stone. Too many people want you, dead or crowned. The word echoed, heavy, crowned. Aerith felt the vision stir again, sharper now. I don't want a throne, she said. Valor smiled, pitying. No one who deserves it ever does. He glanced at Raiden. Your presence complicates things, Alpha. Raiden bared his teeth. Touch her, and I'll tear your world apart. Valor's gaze flickered, assessing. I believe you, he said, which is why I'm not taking her today. Aerith blinked, shock cutting through her fatigue. Valor stepped back, lifting his hands. Consider this a courtesy, he said, a warning. He gestured toward the plains beyond the ravine. Every faction will hunt you now. Loyalists, rebels, those who want the old blood restored, and those who want it erased. Aerith's stomach sank. Why tell us? She demanded. Valor's eyes softened, just slightly. Because chaos benefits me, he replied honestly, and because I dislike surprises. He turned, signaling his hunters. Run, he advised over his shoulder. Learn, decide who you're willing to become. With that, he vanished into the mist, his men melting away like ghosts. Silence reclaimed the ravine, broken only by the wind. Aerith sagged, knees buckling. Raiden caught her, arms strong around her shaking frame. You did that, he said quietly, awe threading his voice. Aerith pressed her face into his shoulder, exhaustion crashing over her. I was terrified, she admitted. Raiden held her tighter. So was I. Sovael rumbled approval, warm and protective. The danger had passed, but the warning lingered, sharp as frost. The world had seen her now. There would be no hiding again. They did not linger. By midday, they were moving east, following an old path etched faintly into the land. Aerith's steps grew steadier with each mile, the power within her settling, no longer a storm but a current she could feel and follow. I don't understand it, she said as they walked. Why me? Raiden glanced at her, expression thoughtful. Maybe because you survived, he said. When others didn't. Aerith thought of her mother, of whispered warnings and hungry nights. Survival had shaped her more than any prophecy. As the sun dipped low, they reached the edge of the Grafen lowlands. Aerith stopped, a strange calm washing over her. This is where I grew up, she said softly. Raiden followed her gaze, seeing not wasteland, but history. Then, this is where we start, he said. Aerith nodded, resolve settling deep. The kingdom had cast her out. The hunters would return. But here, among forgotten paths and stubborn roots, she felt something else take hold. Not fear, Purpose. The gray fen lowlands smelled of wet earth and memory. Aerith slowed as they crossed into the familiar stretch of cracked soil and stubborn grass, her breath catching with every step. This was where she had learned to disappear, where hunger taught patience and silence kept her alive. Ryden watched her closely, sensing the shift through the bond, the way old fear and fragile strength braided together inside her. Broken cottages dotted the distance, roofs sagging, doors hanging open like tired mouths. No one lived here now. The land had been abandoned after the last great purge, when bloodlines were hunted instead of wolves. Aerith stopped near a collapsed well, fingers brushing the stone rim. "My mother hid me here," she said quietly. She said, "The lowlands were forgotten on purpose." Ryden's jaw tightened. Forgotten places were rarely empty by accident. As if summoned by her words, movement stirred near the tree line. Aerith stiffened, instinct screaming. Shapes emerged slowly, cautious and wary. Not hunters, villagers, thin faces, guarded eyes. Survivors. They stared at Aerith like they were seeing a ghost. One woman whispered her name, voice trembling. Aerith swallowed hard. She had not known she was remembered. Ryden stayed back as Aerith stepped forward, hands open. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she said, voice steady despite the weight pressing on her chest. An older man approached, leaning heavily on a staff. His gaze flicked briefly to Ryden, then back to her. "You left," he said, accusation sharp but tired. Aerith nodded. "I had to." Silence stretched, thick with unspoken grief. Finally, the man sighed. "Your mother saved many of us," he said. "She paid for it." The words struck like a blade. Aerith's vision blurred. She had always known her mother died protecting something, but never whom. "What did she protect?" Aerith asked. The man's eyes darkened. "You," he said simply. Murmurs rippled through the small group. Fear mingled with awe. Ryden felt the shift immediately. This was not a frightened crowd. This was a wounded one, searching for meaning. Aerith straightened, pain sharpening into resolve. "I didn't know," she whispered. The man nodded. "That doesn't change what you are." Aerith met his gaze. "Then help me choose what I become." They gathered in the shell of the largest cottage, lanterns casting trembling light against cracked walls. Aerith listened as stories spilled out, fragments of history buried under fear. The old bloodline, the moonbound queens, women who ruled beside wolves, not above them, leaders erased because they could not be controlled. Aerith felt each word settle deep, aligning with the visions that haunted her. Sleep. Ryden watched her from across the room, awe and dread tightening his chest. This was bigger than a bond, bigger than a throne. "The kingdom fears balance," the old man said. "It prefers chains." Aerith's hands curled into fists. She thought of the ashbound court, of stones and laughter. "Then it taught the wrong girl to kneel," she said. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Hope flickered, fragile but real. Ryden felt Sovael stir, recognizing something ancient and right. He stepped forward. "If you shelter her," he said, voice firm, "they will come for you." The man met his gaze without flinching. "They always have, he replied. "This time we won't be alone." That night, Aerith dreamed again, but the vision changed. She stood at the center of the lowlands, roots breaking through stone, wolves and humans standing side by side. Fire burned in the distance, but it did not consume. It forged. She woke before dawn, heart racing, clarity, sharp as frost. Ryden stirred beside her, sensing her shift. "They're coming," she said. He nodded. Yes. Instead of fear, determination settled between them, solid and shared. Aerith rose, stepping outside as the sky blushed pale. The land felt different now. Awake, waiting. She pressed her palm to the earth, breath hitching as warmth answered her touch. Not power alone. Permission. "I won't keep running," she said quietly. Ryden joined her, expression unreadable. "Neither will I." In the distance, horns sounded, faint but unmistakable. The kingdom had found them. Aerith lifted her chin, eyes reflecting the rising sun. For the first time, she did not feel small. She felt ready. The horns grew louder as the sun climbed, their mournful call slicing through the lowlands like a wound reopening. Aerith stood at the edge of the settlement, watching dust rise on the horizon where riders approached in disciplined lines. Fear stirred among the villagers, but it did not scatter them. They moved with purpose, barricading paths, hiding children, sharpening tools never meant for war. Aerith felt the weight of every life pressing against her ribs. This was what the visions had warned her about. Choice. She turned to Reden, whose posture had shifted into something regal and dangerous, the Alpha King waking fully in his bones. "If we fight here, they'll die," she said. Riden nodded slowly. "If we run, they'll burn this place to make an example." The bond pulsed, tight with urgency. Aerith closed her eyes, listening past fear, past instinct, into the deep current beneath. The land answered. She felt it clearly now. The lowlands remembering her blood, her mother's sacrifice, the promise left unfinished. Aerith opened her eyes. "We don't meet them as prey," she said. "We meet them as ground they can't move." Riden searched her face, then inclined his head. "Then lead," he said simply. They met the riders in the open field, where broken stone marked an old boundary. Lord Brenwick rode at the front, armor polished, expression carved into cold satisfaction. Banners snapped behind him, wolves snarling in stitched thread. He dismounted slowly, gaze sweeping over the villagers with open disdain before settling on Aerith. "You could have saved them," he said, "by surrendering." Aerith stepped forward alone, heart pounding but steady. "You would have killed them anyway," she replied. Brenwick smiled thinly. "Order requires sacrifice." Murmurs rippled behind her, anger sharpening courage. Riden moved to her side, silent and solid. Brenwick's eyes flicked to him. "You still have time," he offered. "Stand down. Let the bond be severed cleanly." Aerith laughed once, short and bitter. "You don't know what clean means." She lifted her hand, palm open to the earth. The ground shuddered, a low tremor rolling beneath their feet. Gasps erupted as cracks spidered through the field, roots bursting free, thick and coiling. Brennick staggered back, shock cracking his composure. "What are you?" he demanded. Aerith met his gaze, voice carrying clear and calm. "I am what you tried to erase." The first clash was chaos. Wolves leapt, steel rang, dust and cries filled the air. Aerith moved through it like a current, not striking blindly but shaping space, bending roots and stone to shield the villagers. Exhaustion gnawed at her, each effort costing more than the last. She felt Riden near her always, Sauvael tearing through enemies with ruthless precision, guarding her flanks without a word. The bond thrummed, synchronizing them, each movement a response to the other. A blade cut Aerith's arm, pain flaring bright. She gasped, stumbled, then felt the earth surge, lifting her back to her feet. "Stay with me," Riden shouted, fear threading his voice. Aerith nodded, teeth clenched. She could not afford to fall. Not now. Brennick fought his way toward her, rage etched deep. "This ends today," he snarled, raising his sword. Aerith met him head-on, hands shaking but eyes clear. She did not summon fire. She did not strike. She stepped aside and let the ground swallow his footing. Brenwick fell hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. Before he could rise, roots bound him fast, pinning him to the earth he despised. Silence rippled outward as the tide turned. When the fighting ceased, smoke hung low and heavy. The riders fled, dragging their wounded, banners torn and trampled. Aerith stood in the aftermath, chest heaving, legs trembling as the power receded, leaving bone-deep fatigue. Villagers gathered slowly, awe and disbelief etched into every face. Someone knelt, then another. Aerith's stomach dropped. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Don't." The old man stepped forward, staff planted firm. "We're not bowing to a crown," he said gently. We're standing with one. Aerith swallowed, tears stinging her eyes. Raiden approached, bloodied but unbowed. He looked at her, not as a king looks at a ruler, but as a man looks at truth. They'll call this rebellion, he said quietly. Aerith nodded. Let them. She turned to the villagers, voice steady despite her exhaustion. I won't rule you, she said. I'll protect you, if you choose to stand with me. A beat of silence, then voices rose, fierce and certain. We stand. The words echoed, sealing something irrevocable. That night, as the lowlands settled into uneasy quiet, Aerith sat beside a small fire, hands wrapped around a cup of bitter tea. Her body ached, but her mind was sharp, alive in a way it had never been. Raiden joined her, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Aerith exhaled. They'll never stop, she said. Raiden nodded. No. He glanced at her, silver eyes softening. But neither will you. Aerith smiled faintly. I'm afraid, she admitted. Raiden reached for her hand, careful, reverent. So am I. The bond warmed, no longer a burning demand, but a steady flame. In the distance, wolves howled, not in mourning, but in answer. Aerith looked toward the dark horizon, feeling the weight of what she had begun settle fully onto her shoulders. The kingdom had drawn its line. She had drawn hers in return. Whatever came next would not be survival. It would be reckoning. The reckoning arrived sooner than Aerith expected. 2 days after the battle, a lone rider approached the lowlands beneath a white banner, dust clinging to his cloak like ash. He carried no weapon, only a sealed message marked with the royal sigil. Aerith felt the bond tighten the moment she saw it, a warning and a pull wrapped together. The villagers gathered, wary but unafraid. Aerith stepped forward and took the letter, fingers steady despite the thud of her heart. The message was brief, its words sharp as blades. Queen Halviera demanded parley at Kael'mor. Citadel. No guards. No armies. Only truth, it claimed. Aerith closed her eyes, breathing through the weight of it. A trap was likely. A chance was certain. They want you alone, Raiden said quietly. Aerith shook her head. They want me small, she corrected. I won't be. She looked around at the faces that had chosen her, fear and hope braided tight. If I don't go, they'll come here again, she said. Harder. Silence pressed in. Then the old man nodded once. Go, he said. We'll be ready. Raiden's jaw tightened. I'm coming, he said. Aerith met his gaze. Not as king, she replied gently. As my mate. The bond warmed, steady and sure. He nodded. Kael'mor Citadel loomed darker than Aerith remembered, its towers cutting the sky like accusations. The gates opened without protest, the courtyard empty and echoing. No crowd waited this time, no stones, only the quiet weight of a kingdom holding its breath. Aerith walked beside, Raiden through halls that whispered with memory, her footsteps measured, her spine straight. They were led to the wolf-bound throne, where Queen Halviera stood alone, hands clasped, crown heavy with history. Her eyes softened briefly when she saw Raiden, then sharpened as they settled on Aerith. You've broken our peace, Halviera said. Aerith lifted her chin. You built it on graves. A flicker of pain crossed the queen's face. You've awakened forces we buried for a reason, she replied. Aerith felt the land stir beneath stone, patient and listening. You buried balance, Aerith said. It grew roots. Silence stretched. Halviera exhaled, the sound weary. They will not accept you, she said. Even now, councils plot, armies gather. Aerith nodded. Then let them see me. She stepped forward, palms open. Not as a conqueror, she said. As a choice. The throne room seemed to breathe. The test was not fire or blood this time. It was memory. Halviera raised her hand, and the walls shimmered, images bleeding into the air like mist. The purge. Women hunted. Wolves forced to kneel. Aerith staggered as grief slammed into her. ancient and raw. She felt her mother's fear, her courage, the moment she chose to hide a child rather than bend. Tears streamed down Aerith's face, unchecked. Raiden moved closer, his presence a steady anchor. "This is what you ask us to relive," Halviera said quietly. "This is what returns if you rule." Aerith wiped her cheeks, breathing hard. "This returns if I don't," she said. The images shifted, the lowlands burning, children crying, wolves turning on wolves. Aerith's chest ached, but she did not look away. "I won't erase your pain," she said. "I'll carry it, with you." The throne room stilled, the visions fading. Halviera studied her, searching. "What do you want?" she asked. Aerith answered without hesitation. "An end to the hunt," she said. Council shared. "Wolves and humans bound by choice, not fear." Murmurs echoed faintly beyond the doors, as if the citadel itself listened. The challenge came swift and cruel. Lord Brennick was dragged into the hall, bruised and bound, hatred blazing in his eyes. "Justice," Halviera said. "Your way." Aerith's stomach twisted. She felt the eyes of the unseen court on her, waiting for blood. Brenwick spat. "Kill me," he snarled. "Prove them right." Aerith knelt before him, meeting his gaze. She saw fear there, buried deep beneath arrogance. "You don't get to define me," she said softly. She rose and turned to Halviera. "Exile," Aerith said. "Stripped of title. Let him live with what he's done." Shock rippled through the hall. Brenwick laughed, brittle and disbelieving. Halviera watched Aerith closely, then nodded once. "So be it." The sentence fell heavy and final. Raiden released a breath he hadn't known he held. Mercy would anger many. It would also change everything. Aerith felt the bond hum, approval warming her bones. This was the line she would not cross. As dusk bled into night, Aerith stood on the balcony overlooking the city, lights flickering like stars brought to earth. The kingdom felt different now, not healed but listening. Raiden joined her, wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. "They'll test you again," he said. Aerith leaned into him, tired but unbowed. "I know." She looked out over Kael'mor, the weight of it settling fully. "But they won't test me alone." Below, wolves howled, not in challenge, but in answer. Aerith closed her eyes, feeling the land respond, steady and alive. The final storm gathered on the horizon, heavy with promise. Chapter by chapter, choice by choice, the world was shifting, and she was no longer afraid of the change. The storm broke the night after the parley. Thunder rolled over Kael'mor like a warning growl, rain lashing the towers until stone wept dark trails. Aerith woke with the bond screaming, pain and urgency braided tight. She sat upright, breath tearing free, the taste of iron sharp on her tongue. "They're here," she whispered. Raiden was already moving, boots on stone, Sovael pressing hard against his ribs. Bells began to toll, too fast, too frantic. From the balcony, Aerith saw torches flaring across the lower courtyards, banners rising that did not bear the crown. Rebels. Loyalists split from loyalists, blades turned inward. The city shuddered as gates slammed and shouted orders fractured into chaos. Aerith felt the land recoil beneath the citadel, confused and angry. "They're trying to force the severing," Raiden said grimly, pulling on his cloak. Aerith nodded, fear sharpening into clarity. The vision she had seen was unfolding, not as fate, but as consequence. "Then we end it tonight," she said. Rain soaked her hair as they ran, lightning turning the courtyards into harsh white snapshots, faces twisted with fury, wolves lunging, steel ringing. Aerith lifted her hands, not to command, but to call. The ground answered, steady and sure. Roots breaking stone to halt the crush, walls of earth rising to shield the innocent. Power burned, but she held it carefully, like fire cupped in bare palms. They reached the wolf-bound throne as the doors burst inward. Valar Kain strode through the smoke with practiced ease, eyes bright with anticipation. "You took too long," he said lightly. "Change hates patience." Aerith stepped forward, heart hammering. "You lit the fuse," she replied. Valor inclined his head. Someone had to. He gestured, and armed figures poured in behind him. Nobles, guards, faces she recognized from the court. Fear twisted into resolve in Aerith's chest. "This ends now," she said, voice carrying despite the roar outside. Valor smiled. "It does." He lunged fast and precise. Raiden met him in a crash of motion, Sovael tearing free, silver and savage. The throne room dissolved into violence. Aerith felt the pull of every life in the space, a chorus of panic and rage. She moved through it, shaping space rather than striking bodies, deflecting blades, locking doors with stone, separating fighters who could not see past their own fear. A blade sliced her side. Pain flared, breath stuttering. She tasted blood and steadied herself, grounding through the bond. "Stay with me," Raiden shouted, voice raw. Aerith nodded once and raised her hands. The air hummed. Moonlight punched through the storm-torn ceiling, silver and pure, bathing the room in a cold glow. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Valor broke the stillness with laughter, even as the light pressed against him. "There it is," he said, breathless. "The crown without metal." He rushed Aerith, faster than before. She did not step back. She planted her feet and let the truth rise. The light bent, not blinding, but revealing. Valor faltered, shock cracking his focus as the bond flared outward, not as domination, but invitation. He staggered, clutching his head. "What are you doing?" he snarled. Aerith's voice shook but held. "Showing you a choice." Images spilled into the air. Hunts turned to massacres, fear calcifying into law, then a different path branching beside it. Shared councils, borders opened, wolves and humans standing shoulder to shoulder. Valor screamed, dropping to his knees as the visions tore at him. "Make it stop," he begged. Aerith's chest burned. "It stops when you choose," she said softly. Valor's eyes found hers, hatred flickering, then something like grief. He slumped, the fight draining from him. Silence crashed down again, heavy and fragile. Outside, the storm began to ease, rain softening to a steady hush. The cost came swift and cruel. As the last rebels fled, Aerith's knees buckled, the world tilting hard. The power she had held so carefully ripped through her defenses, exhaustion crashing like a wave. She collapsed, breath shallow, vision dimming. Raiden caught her, panic flaring bright and sharp through the bond. "Stay," he pleaded, pressing his forehead to hers. Aerith managed a faint smile. "I am," she whispered, though darkness crept in from the edges. Sovael howled, a sound of fear and fury that echoed through stone. He pressed close, sharing strength, anchoring her to warmth and life. Aerith focused on that, on the steady thrum of the bond, the feel of Raiden's hands, the sound of the city breathing again. Pain ebbed, replaced by a deep, bone-weary ache. When she opened her eyes, dawn light spilled through shattered stone, gentle and pale. Queen Halviera stood nearby, crown set aside, eyes wet. "It's done," she said quietly. Aerith swallowed, nodding once. "Then don't waste it," she murmured. By sunrise, the city had changed. Not healed, never healed, but awake. Aerith stood on the balcony again, bandaged and unsteady, watching people gather. Below, not in rage, but in wary hope. Raiden stood beside her, his hand warm at her back. "They'll argue," he said. Aerith smiled faintly. "They should." She breathed in the cool air, feeling the land settle, roots easing, stone quieting. The storm had taken its due, but it had also washed the blood from the steps. Aerith looked out over Kael'mor and felt the last vision fade, not erased, but transformed. This was not an ending written in fire. It was one written in choice, renewed with every breath. She turned to Raiden, resolve steady and clear. "Let's finish this," she said. Morning settled over Kael'mor Citadel like a cautious promise. The storm clouds thinned, revealing a pale blue sky streaked with gold, and the city below stirred in low, uncertain rhythms. Aerith stood on the balcony, wrapped in a wool cloak, the stone cool beneath her bare feet. Every breath ached, her body reminding her of the cost she had paid, but she remained upright. Below, people gathered, not in mobs but clusters, wolves and humans standing side by side, whispering, watching, waiting. Aerith felt them through the land, a soft hum of curiosity and fragile hope. Raiden joined her, his presence steady and grounding, Sovael quiet but alert within him. "They're afraid," Aerith said softly. Raiden nodded. "So were we." She turned to him, searching his face. "I won't rule alone," she said. "Not as queen, not as legend." Raiden met her gaze, silver eyes clear. "Then don't," he replied. "Build something that doesn't need a single crown." The bond warmed, approval flowing between them. Aerith exhaled slowly. This was the choice she had been walking toward since the first stone struck her shoulder. Not power over others, but responsibility with them. The council convened at midday in the open courtyard, the shattered throne room left deliberately behind. Chairs were arranged in a wide circle instead of tiers, nobles seated beside villagers, packs, leaders beside artisans. Murmurs rippled as Aerith entered, leaning lightly on Raiden's arm. She felt every eye on her, weighing, doubting, hoping. Queen Halviera stood and removed her crown, placing it on the stone at the center of the circle. The simple gesture stilled the crowd. "The old order failed," Halviera said, voice carrying without strain. "It feared what it could not control." She gestured to Aerith. "This woman survived that fear. She chose mercy when blood was demanded. Choice when force was easier." Aerith swallowed, heart pounding. Halviera stepped back. Silence pressed in. Aerith stepped forward, hands shaking only slightly. "I won't promise perfection," she said clearly. "I won't promise peace without effort. I promise only this: no one will be hunted for who they are again." A beat. Then a voice rose. Then another. Agreement built not like thunder, but like rain, soft, steady, unstoppable. The first decree was not law, but invitation. Councils would be shared. Pacts would govern their lands with human partners. Borders would be watched together. Some protested, many argued. Aerith listened, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. By dusk, a framework stood where nothing had before, imperfect and alive. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, but pride settled deeper, quiet and fierce. As the gathering dispersed, Aerith lingered at the center, the abandoned crown still resting on stone. She knelt and lifted it, feeling its weight, then set it aside. The crowd watched, breath held. Aerith straightened. "We don't need this," she said gently. "We need each other." A murmur swept through the courtyard, relief and wonder mingling. Raiden felt Sovael stir, approval rolling through him like distant thunder. The wolf had chosen well. That night, Kelmore breathed easier. Fires burned in hearths, not as signals of war but warmth. Aerith walked the quiet corridors, memories echoing differently now. She paused outside, the cell where she had once been held, fingers brushing the iron latch. Fear flickered, then faded. She was not that girl anymore. Raiden waited at the end of the hall, leaning against the wall, arms crossed loosely. "You okay?" he asked. Aerith smiled, small but real. "I am." She stepped into his arms, resting her forehead against his chest. The bond thrummed, not demanding, simply present. "They'll test us again," she said. "They always will." Raiden kissed her hair, voice low. "Then we'll choose again." Outside, wolves howled, not in challenge, but in welcome. The sound wrapped around Aerith, settling deep in her bones. She closed her eyes, breathing in the night, the city, the future unfolding one careful step at a time. Weeks passed. The lowlands bloomed stubborn green, protected by new patrols and old resolve. Children laughed where fear once lingered. Aerith traveled often, listening more than speaking, learning the rhythm of a kingdom unlearning itself. Some nights she dreamed of fire still, but it no longer consumed. It forged. One evening, standing beneath a full moon on the moon-split road, Aerith felt the last thread of doubt loosen. She turned to Raiden, the wind tugging at her cloak. wise wolf chose me," she said quietly, the words that had once felt like a curse. Ryden smiled, soft and sure, "And the kingdom learned to choose you." Aerith looked out over the land, feeling its steady pulse answer her own. Hated once, feared still, but no longer alone. The story did not end with her ascent or their bond. It ended with a beginning, one written not in prophecy or blood, but in choice, renewed with every dawn. If this story stayed with you, don't leave quietly. Hit the like button to support stories where love challenges power and courage, reshapes destiny. Subscribe so you never miss another emotionally gripping werewolf romance. Now tell me in the comments, do you believe the kingdom truly changed, or is peace only temporary? And if you were in her place, would you have chosen mercy or power? Your thoughts matter here. They help shape what story comes next.